Hello, welcome to Reloved Guitars, and it's a Sunday and it's mighty windy out there. Look at my little spray booth. Yeah, windy. It's autumn time. Oh, next door neighbours. Anyway, what I've got here is Chris's Telecaster. It's a Mexico. So hold on a second while I plug you into the power. Come on, man. Out you go. Right. All going good. Right. Mexican Telecaster. And this is in just for a setup. Loose on the strap buttons, but it's a lovely looking thing. Mexican butterscotch, made of Mexico. Satin neck, satin finished neck, full width body, string through. Actually a screw-in jack socket, which is the best kind, thank you. And I know Chris has upgraded the pickups in here, so they're pretty good stuff. And he's upgraded the saddles too, so we've got these brushed steel, stainless probably, saddles. They look pretty good. So I don't anticipate any odd things with this one, unlike the last one. Now the last one, the strap is still in hold because I'm waiting for the amber nitro spray to arrive, so I can give it a refinish on the top. What I've been doing in the meantime on that one is I've been building up the poly on the side just to make sure that it's strong enough, or it's a nice strong edge to join up with the coloured or the tinted nitro. That's going to be the simplest way to get a finish, a nice smooth, even, consistent finish. I mean, personally, I kind of like the idea of finishing it all back up in a stronger, thicker layer of poly, but it's not possible to do with frets already pressed in place. And on that neck, the frets are kind of halfway through their life, sort of thing. So it's a sort of false economy to try and, I don't know, to try and work poly in between, because you can't smooth it out unless you're spraying it with a compressor. I've tried various spray polys in a can, but it just not really got a good result from any of them, so I prefer to do nitro for a finish on that neck. Meanwhile, this is a different finish. I mean, it's still poly. We've got satin on the back here, and we've actually got a gloss finish on the front, but unlike the previous one, this looks like a much more robust finish. This has been done where it's been sprayed first and then the frets applied on top, so you can sort of see evidence of where the frets have been pressed in. I'm always interested in that because the different approaches to fretting kind of result in different challenges. If the finish is laid over like a carpet, if it's a very light finish like I'm going to do on the Strat neck, then it's okay because you can sand off the tops of the frets and just play. If it's a heavy, thick finish, you get this sort of carpet effect as it rides up and over the frets. And if you break, if you have to refret or something and you break that carpet seal at the corners where it joins, right, where it sort of rides up the side of the fret, as soon as you break that on those kinds of finishes, the finish peels back off. Now that wasn't the case with Chris's Strat. The case with that, apparently it's well known or notorious, that era of Mexican Strats for having poor finish, and it was incredibly thin and it just literally flaked off like that. You could do that. I'm not sure it was connected with any underlying moisture issues. The body certainly, I think, had a spill on it, which basically rusted most of the pickguard screws and a couple of probably the tremolo screws, hence the previous owner replaced them. But anyway, that's a different issue. But it was an all-round lousy, flimsy finish on the neck, hence the problems. This looks much more robust, so I don't think, fingers crossed, I think we'll have no problem with that. Now Chris wants eights on both of these guitars, so I don't really have a set of eights to use as a sacrificial set for this guitar. So what I'll do is I'll use nines to do the setup, and then we'll kind of go back to eights and retweak any truss rod adjustments. It's going to be a similar, it'll do the same thing, it'll bend the neck a little bit, and we'll get it, we'll use the sacrificial nines, of which I've got lots of sets, courtesy of Simon's Sacrificial Strings. Thanks again, Simon, for that. Without you, I would be Well, what I'd be without you is I'd be bending straight, or trying to bend straight, an awful lot of strings, old strings, which when you're trying to get them through the body or through a tremolo block is an absolute pain in the you-know-where. Now these are interesting tuners here. I'm seeing 3 are different from the last 3 are different from the first 3. They're all locking, but we've got a smaller set here. So what they've done is they've kind of compressed the tuner down, and it looks different. I'm not sure, I'm trying to work out why it needs to be that different. Holes lower. It still has a string tree in there, by the way, which is quite funny. It takes care of those 2. But anyway, so let's get a set of 9s out of the free department. Oh God, I've got so many spare strings at the moment. And thanks to Simon, I'm able to choose these strings and just use them rather than go through that long-winded bending process, which can be an absolute pain, it really can. So here we have the luxury, and it is a luxury, so Simon, thank you again, of just grabbing some free strings that didn't cost me anything and sacrificing them at the altar. And they're actually not that bad strings, to be honest. I've used them a couple of times for myself and I wouldn't massively have noticed the difference. So to begin this, I'm going to kick off by stringing this whole thing, and we'll put it under load with 9s and we'll see how it looks and how it plays, and that will be the first indicator of what the frets are like. Now, close-up examination with my Martin supplied, not Martin a company, Martin the supporter of Really Love Guitars, Martin supplied lensy thing. I had a close-up look at fret tops, and there is a bit of evidence of fret leveling, so again I think that might be a factory touch, which isn't a bad thing. But it's mild, so I think we'll find this should be pretty good to start with. As always, I'll go for my sort of low action, and then we'll leave it in so far that it could be raised up if it's too low for some players. This is a nice looking, beautiful looking guitar, and with these new pickups in. In fact, it says here what they are. So that this neck pickup is a bare knuckle Riff Raff, and the Brown Sugar at the bridge, and it's wired in. It's been wired in a what's it called? Brown Sugar blend, or it's modelled after Keith Richards' original Telecaster, the Corba Telecaster, which I don't know a lot about, but so this is a guitar that Chris plans to use with an open G tuning. Pretty sure, drop G, open G, drop G. I don't know, but he's going to use it in a Keith Richards style. He said he was using his Gibson Melody Maker that we saw here a couple of months ago. That's 11 on my left and 10 spare, the spare 9s. These are great. They're not that bad strings, and you get a spare B and a spare E with each pack. That's a bargain. So for me, doing this kind of sacrificial string business, stretching and testing, having a spare one of these is absolutely brilliant in a set of strings that didn't cost me anything. So Simon, you are a lifesaver. Yeah, so this is going. That's interesting. This is going to be Chris's Keith Richards style guitar. Now I'm going to label these 11 and 9 so that we know what they are for future reuse when we break something and need to fit a 9 in a hurry, or 11. 9, 11. Nine, 11. Spares. Up here into the department of spares. Rubbish in the bin. I think this should stand up now because I've glued those in place so they can set. Well, I resined those, what's the word for it? Ferrules on this guitar kit. Ideally I should have bought the converter bushes, but they were close, and so I chose to resin them in because that guitar is so light it's going to need to stick with those tuners whether someone likes them or not. Okay, so this is a locking tuner, so I'm just going to pretty much lock it in place. Now, where's the hole? Where's it gone? There it is. Yeah, so this is the first part of this. We're going to just load the neck up and see how it plays and performs and see what we need to do. Yeah, the other one that Chris sent me with this, or came from the auctioneers, was an interesting thing. I was at pains to state when I emailed Chris about it. I was at pains to state that any water damage resulting from what feels to me like possibly a spill somewhere in the past that somebody's quickly mopped up, but not before water has gone, as it always does, into the screw holes. It goes underneath the pick guard and then quite quickly into the pick guard screw holes because it's got a place to go under gravity. And I was thinking that possibly it was residual damp that was causing that had caused the rust, but I had to think that for that to have happened, A, there would be more residual rust on the rest of the guitar, and B, I don't think there's enough. It wasn't like surface rust, which you often get when something sits in a wet basement for a long time. It was right down to the bottom of the screw rust. So there's really only two possible solutions for that. One is that water's spilled in there and gone into those holes, or the other one is that the wood has an unusually high moisture content, which causes the springs to rust. And that's possible. You know, there's, as far as I understand it, all manufacturers are, you know, fighting a constant pressure to get guitars built and out the door. And seasoning the wood and drying it can you know, slow the process of manufacture down if you're not planned correctly, or you haven't got your production sequence correct. But anyway, who knows? The point is that they were completely rusty, and I suspect that the tremolo screws, since they had clearly been replaced, I suspect that they were in fact replaced because they too were rusty. So we shall probably never know. But what was interesting is that the previous owner who had replaced them, I think I know pretty certain he'd replaced them with the wrong size, with the result that they were obstructing the tremolo, causing it to fail to return to pitch. So going back, a reduction in diameter at the top of the tremolo screw helped us to get that freed up. Okay, so here I'm going to replace this. Now this string tree here is really steep. It's right down to the body of the guitar, but it doesn't absolutely doesn't need that much. So I'm going to use one of these Tusq trees, and it's funny how far in that's put because it is an extreme angle. But we'll take it out. We've changed the other one on the Strat as well. So we'll just put this off to the side. Just double check the diameter. It's very close. It's a little bit larger, but it won't be a major problem. It's like a pilot hole already drilled. Okay. Yeah, like I say, this really doesn't need to be as low as it was anyway. So this will should hold it at the right height. They've been making these things for a long time, these Tusky people. Okay, so the action on this is not set yet. Chris has just put the components on, or had them put on, I don't know if he did it himself. And so that at the moment the saddles are all at the wrong height. However, We'll see what it looks like if we can tune it up to begin with. It might not actually be enough height in some of these. Wow, that's interesting. So that's almost not enough height. It's not too far off. We'll probably get away with it. American style, US style. So let's just get them up so that they actually ring out. There we go. There you go. I don't like these locking tuners for exactly this reason. They weaken the string massively. If you don't tie them tight enough, they pop out. If you tighten them too tight, they crimp the string and break it. So there we are with another pack of strings down tubes. Thankfully, due to the good man himself, we have some spares of this gauge, but basically, that sort of splits another pack up, which now is the right old pain because we're short now. Might be able to find a match somewhere along the line, but right now you can get out of jail. So again, there's one of these things that you don't really get told how tight or not to attach these things. Now I've got to pull this little bit out. So that's the crimp that does the damage. What you can do, if you don't want to over crimp the string and run the risk of breaking it, you can lock it up, or you can add an extra loop around it, or half a loop, or maybe no, you probably need a loop. But it is quite difficult to know what is where you can go to and where you can't. Right, spares minus the A string. Minus the A string. Not quite why they're on the floor down there, but they just happen to be, so that's the way it is. This plastic junk in the bin. Okay, get a note again. The ends of these frets are a little bit sharp. Okay, that's on the deck as well. So I'm just going to do a quick. Ooh. Okay, we could be struggling. We might be struggling to. These are going to be standing quite tall now. That's not often. That's not too common a problem. It's usually the other way around. They're too high, and we have to shim the neck. But in this case, we're starting with these standing. Whoa, that's way tall. Right. Now that's interesting. Now why would that be? I mean, this is a standard plate. So that's a little flag going off for me. Why would you have to have a set of saddles standing this far up to make this guitar play? Weird. Not quite what I would expect. But hey. Please don't break. I didn't mean to overclamp you. That's a long way north, it really is. Right, let's get the measurement out. Let's just tidy up these heights a little bit before we kind of get an overall impression. This is going to be still quite low. Wow, that is low. It's nowhere near 1.5 yet. We are starting from standing on our stilts, baby. Okay, it's just a fraction over. So as a start point, that's good. Way low, way low, way low. Now we are really at the reach. That is a problem. This is not an unusual set of saddles, and they shouldn't be standing this tall. They shouldn't have to stand this tall to operate correctly. Let's have a look. But it is. So the neck is too deep. There's too much neck material, standing too high. That's weird. Or the pocket's too shallow. That's another way of putting it. Wow. I'm just doing this bit by eye for a minute. Mm, 1.3, 1.2-ish, 1.5, too tall, too tall. Not very much. 1.2 and about 1.2. Okay, that's quite right. But look how tall these are standing. It's not the end of the world, but it makes the angle fairly steep. Right. So first observation, as I already made, we've got, well, first observations, we've got a fairly good first fret action. Impressive, good. We've got about 0.225 neck relief, good. And we've got my target low action down at this end. But to even get to that, those there pins are on there, or the saddles are pretty high up. Now the positive about that is that they're nice and smooth under the palm, so you don't want them, you don't want the grub screws sticking out. So while that's the case, that's good. They surprised me how high they are. It's quite a tight radius. It looks like a 9.5, so there's quite a lot of radius obviously and on there as well. What else strikes me about this? Well, the pickups obviously are pretty low in respect of where the strings are now, and again that's a what's the word, subjective choice. These are slotted, which is always a pleasant surprise. Thank you. bare knuckles. So then you have to spend some time finding your darned hidden screwdrivers. Well, not the one I was after, but it'll probably do. So we can raise this out, depending. Again, like I say, it's just purely a personal preference where people like their pickups. But if we go for about 3mm, which is a sort of start point, then we've got quite a way to come out here. And there are some nice cellophane covering the pickup still. So quite a long way to get this out. Let's just use two hands to make this easier and safer. Okay, wobble, wobble, wobble. Down on the bass bit, a tiny fraction. Okay, and then these are still low, so these are now courtesy of what's it? One of these Phillipsy thing. Ouch. Yeah, it's staggered, and the D is higher, taller than all of them. Okay. Interesting. So what we've got here, we've got some quite loose springs, and these may well be vibrating. Certainly the what do you call it? The thing I'm looking for, the intonation, it won't be right for starters, but or it doesn't look right for starters. But that's only because I think Chris has just put these on and not set anything. So let's just take a quick running jump and have a look. And we've got 648. So they're a bit too far back. Now, the problem with that is if we go forward again still, we're going to get even looser springs. So it may well be that this needs some replacement springs, which is going to be a pain in the what's it, because we have to take the strings off and do all the other stuff. Now, okay, let's call the thank you, Henry. Let's leave that as a later thing. Tusq trees. One of those goes back to replace the one I put on the strap. Right, yes. So we kind of worry about that afterwards, but we'll need to get ourselves some sets of, yeah, just completely loose. If we were to go back to the, they've got to come this way. The saddles have got to come this way, which means these are all going to be even looser. Oh, this one's falling out. It's only barely in. They're nice machined screws, that's for sure. But they are loose because they're not under any pressure, which is a risk. No one wants just to fall out. Okay, so we've got some sort of buzz going on there. That's a first watch out. Okay, so we've got sort of familiar choke out. And we're choking out on sort of between the G and the D, so in between G and the D on the 14th fret, with a bit more either side. So we know we've got a bit of a choke out at that sort of height. Now 1.2mm action down here on a high E on a Telecaster with a 9.5-inch radius. It's quite a stretch. Now, interestingly, I don't like that B. It's dead. I've had this a couple of times now. In fact, I had it on both Strats, both the Strat with this same nut from the same factory. And I think, I can't tell you immediately, but I think it's because the slot is cut horizontal and not tilted backwards. Now, I can't exactly prove that, and I can't really even see it that close. Pardon me for a second. Donk. That doesn't look sloped backwards at all. I mean, like I say, I really can't. I can't prove it. Let's see if I can get a picture. That's going to be part of the problem. And I had this exactly the same thing on the Strat, and I think it was probably that string that was deadish as well. Let's see if I can get a. Ooh. Come on, focus. Where would I put that? Just sit it there. Will that help? Maybe. Ooh. Try and stabilise it so I can at least get a shot of it. Not a very good photograph, I must say. What it's showing me is that it's the string is hitting both ends, but not all the way. So it's as if it's hollowed, curved, not that. It needs to be that, and it looks like it's flat with a bit of a curve in the middle, which is why it's sitting on either end. But it's kind of good to be able to look at it this closely, though it's not really revealing me too much unless I throw the light around a bit more. What I'm trying to show up is the sense of it being a flat thing rather than a sloping thing. If I can just get this to focus, I'll be with you. Something. Whoa, please steady your device. Sorry. So, not bad pictures for a simple camera. But yeah, so what it's showing me is that the height of the wall of this little slot is exactly the same all the way across, which means it's flat, and it needs to be smaller at the front, larger at the back, and it isn't. So hopefully we've got a tiny bit of room to repair that, because these are higher than I would like them. If we can't do it, we'd need to replace it. And with these, they are beautifully fitted, and it would be a bit of a crime to have to pull that out. I promise you, you will not get as clean a fit as that, no matter how many people think somehow you should be able to. A luthier almost certainly will not get as clean a fit, because you're taking something out and replacing it with something. And this is manufactured to precise specification in the factory, and your replacements almost certainly won't be the same. So definitely I want to preserve this nut rather than replace it in such a nice fit. Now the thing, before I start anything, let's go back. We've got our last fret action the way we want it. We slightly sharp frets. We've got our relief with these strings on. It's very small actually, but it's some that will do. And then we've got a slightly high first fret action, and which is clearly problematic. See, even pressing it down here won't improve it, because it's lying, the string is lying flat in the slot. It needs to be coming up off the top, so the string is pivoting away from there, Currently it's like that. So we're going to try and remedy that, and do our very best to remedy it with this extra special glasses on. So I'm going to get my freshly cleaned up, what you call it, these things, nut files, and these are geared up for an 12 set. Now that might seem extreme, but actually it's much better. You actually need several sizes bigger in my experience for what you're doing. Now some people will get freaked out by that, but I guarantee you if you go for exactly the same size, or same size, you'll end up with the things sticking. Now my challenge here is to cut this backwards in a way that it hasn't already, and the problem we've got here is with a very low action. Fender, in its wisdom, puts a little shelf of wood behind there, and there are times, and this could be it, where you actually can't get the correct angle. Right, you need the same angle as the strings are going back here, if not a tiny bit more, just to be on the safe side. But so you're not going flat. The slot hasn't to be flat; it has to be like that. The problem with that is, with the little shelf of wood behind here, Fender has ensured that we can't do it without running the risk of hitting the little shelf. Right, and that's par for the course. Now, about the only thing you can do is you can give yourself a little buffer. Well, the problem is, like all things, if you put something like Gorilla Tape, which you want to do because it will bounce off that, you may end up finding a serious flaw in the finish, which you really don't want to find out that way. So you try and add a bit of something protective in there for the time being, so that it will just give you a little bit of protection were you to go in that direction. Now, the point about all of this is we're going for a height adjustment, but more importantly right now we're bothered about the angle. So I'm going to start by just running this backwards, and I'm really looking closely at that angle, and I want to make sure if we do any cutting at all, it's enhancing that backwards angle, because we ideally would want to do it on all of them, but certainly on that B, which is sounding dead. So again, it's not, if the G isn't the end of the world at the moment, because that wasn't sounding too bad, but it was a fraction high. So now this is a Tusq material, and I've found that this is not massively dependable when it comes to cutting with nut files. It behaves more like a plastic than bone, for example. Bone is reassuringly consistent in the way that it cuts, so you can get to very low and precise actions without running into any trouble. Pretty much close to the mark, and I hope we're in the right sort of angle. Now I think I'm going to tear this bit off. And we'll just hoik our problematic B string over here. Now there's that dead sounding thing, and we're going to go out to the next grade up, and again we're going to be aiming for a very small reduction, but more importantly that backwards tilt, and again really watching carefully on the how it's going over the nut here. We don't want to hit just touch the tape there. It's very, very difficult to do without any contact. Brief power failure. Doesn't like it very much. That spring is also dead down there, which I'm just going to do something for a second, just in case this is part of it. I'm just going to tape off that spring. Yeah, not bad, but not too great. Okay, so let's just concentrate on cutting this slope without, we don't want to go too close to the wood. Again, it's very difficult to avoid. Oh, wait the hell a minute. What's going on here? Hey? Oh, this is bizarre. Right. Nobody warned me about this is why. This is not helping things. Brilliant. Wow. Who would have thought that? Oh my lord. Okay, Chris. These... That's a fault in the design. Wow. That's why it's sounding dead. It's not. It's partly not helped by the nut. But these strings get caught up on the edge of the little saddle insert. Damn it. That's no good at all. Ah. Better. Good. Okay, we'll carry on doing this because we need to. It's still too tall, and we still want to increase that angle. But and it was a problem on both. Has been a problem on both these guitars. But that's the dodgy thing to watch out. I should have taken a picture of it. Watch out for that. All three of these bare strings hung up on the black edge between the metal and the the plastic insert, and without even being able to see it, had done it, and that was killing the sound more than anything else. Wow, how about that? Slight catch you out thing there, so definitely keep an eye out for that. I'm just increasing these angles anyway to be on the safe side. This one's quite taking a while to go down, and this is the bit that bothers me about this synthetic bone stuff, is it doesn't seem to do anything until you suddenly get to a point it's gone down too far, which isn't the case here, but you really have to be careful not to run down too far. Like I say, bone just seems to behave completely differently to this. You sort of know where you are with it, so I'm trying to be as ultra careful as I can be. Come on. And we've got a nice slope, but it's too high at the front of the slope basically, so I need to give it some downwards cutting, nearly there. Talking such tiny values here that it's very hard when you're working at such small clearances to get it exactly right, and it feels always way too easy to overcut it. You get frustrated and you put a bit too much effort into it and you're over. I'm going to stop there with that one. Just slack these off a little bit. Switch. So yeah, note number one, watch out. This is practically on the mark. Sounds alright, I'm not going to mess with that. I'm just going to go down a tiny fraction on that. Okay. mainly what I'm doing here is just slightly widening the slots as I'm doing this, just to make sure they're take all gauges of strings that you might want to change to. Not bad. Quit while they're going is good. That's really fascinating, that little thing about the inserts. I'll take a close-up photograph with my photograph. It sounds like an old-fashioned thing. Close-up photograph with my photographing apparatus, and yeah, we'll kind of see how it actually looks when the thing's off to one side, which is really odd. Okay, jolly good. Just double check this before we do anything else. 1.5 on the mark. Tad under 1.5, but a little too much under 1.5. Crank it up. Okay. Yeah. The other thing with these two little things on stilts arrangements, if you don't get them the exact same tension on both of the grub screws, you get potential for rattle in the grub screws, so you always need to go through and make sure they're both bits are tensioned, both legs are under tension. That one's quite loose, you see, and that one's tensioned. Okay, we're nearly there on positioning. So fiddly. This one needs to be a little bit higher still. Again, we're not worrying about the what's that called, intonation yet, because we know we're going to have a problem there due to the shortness of the screws, so we're going to line up 6 new screws in case we need them. Okay, so our target action is still quite low really. I'm going to do a quarter of a turn on everything. Our target action, we still slightly, not buzzy, but you can just hear struggling for clearance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it all about a quarter of a turn above the mark. And then we'll look at it again. check it. Yeah. Yeah, it's not bad. Just check something here. Okay, it's pretty close. I'm just keeping an eye on this G angle, gangle. It's that break angle is marginal over there. It might be that this thing really wants a second tree. I'll check with Chris if he's okay with that. That really is. I mean, in fact, if I go with a incredibly thin object, well, we can measure it as it's about 4 degrees, but it's close. But it's how it was designed, so who am I to criticise? Okay, but it's only. But given it's an open G, I'm going to suggest to Chris that we put a tree on there. Even with these fabulous staggered, whatchamacallits. I'm not going to worry about it for now, but that's a note to self. So a couple of things. Spring lengths are wrong. Easy to get off the mark. I'm going to hook this up again on the side of the little saddle and show you in a photograph what I mean. This is how it fell. How it just by default fell as I pushed it through and tuned, strung all 3 of these top strings. I'm going to photograph this in close-up mode and you'll see what I mean, but it's one to watch out for because that really does strangle the tone. Well, all 3 went that way by default as I was stringing, so wow, you really can get a good shot. Look at that. That's how it hung up. All 3 of them as I strung the guitar. It preferred to hang up on there than go into the groove, so definitely watch out for that. Otherwise, beautiful looking, whatchamacallits. But yeah, because they come from the back and the separation on this thing kind of starts down there at the back. It almost by default leads them in, so you're going to get that problem. So, now the question is, at the heights that I've set this at now, do we get the choke out? Yeah, we do. So if we want this action nice and low, and we want those bends, we are going to have to do the very careful fret level. And so, with that in mind, I'm going to gently drop off most of the strings, and while I'm at it, there's a couple of little nicks here and there on these frets, which is interesting too, thinking about what their history is. I'm going to very carefully mark up the fret tops, ready for some very gentle fret leveling action, with basically the intention of clearing up those chokes, or that one choke on the high E. Now, the truth is, if you can't get that, then you have to compromise, and sometimes on a 9.5 or tighter it's impossible, well no, it can be nigh on impossible to get a really low action plus all the bends. On a tight radius like this, so sometimes you can't do anything about it, and in that case you're in a kind of, what's the word, diminishing returns if you try and fret level your way to bend for a choke free bend. See, that's too loose down there. Anyway, yeah, so you can find yourself going nowhere trying to get fret level it out. So what you end up having to do, only on the 7.25s and occasionally the 9.5s, is you end up having to just compromise by raising the playing action down here by a small fraction, and it's just the kind of constraints of the geometry really. The tighter the radius, the more you are diminishing or reducing your clearance as you push the string uphill in the bend situation, away from its low start position, and then it goes up the hill on the bend, and the fulcrum of the top of the fret up the hill, and then the string goes away from that downhill again, and that relative amount of downhill as it goes down to the bridge saddle takes away any clearance you had, and it means you just cannot make the note sound out. And that's why it shows up really strongly on the 7.25 vintage radii, more than you won't see it on a 12-inch Les Paul radius, or even one of the modern Strats or Ibanez type shreddery things with their flat 16 to 20 whatever radius. Now what I'm doing here obviously is I'm using a set of strings as a means to just load the neck and as a guide to leveling the frets we've got here. So for people who don't quite understand or haven't got their heads around this process, the reason some people think that I'm obsessed with levelling with a curved neck just for the sake of it, and that isn't true. I don't care about the curvature or otherwise. What I care about is the primary reason I do it this way is because doing it this way allows me, because the strings are on, I can tell very quickly the point at which I've freed up, I've levelled enough to free up whatever obstruction I'm aiming to free up. Now obviously you don't have to think too far about it to realise I can't do that with a conventional fret levelling method. You end up having to, all you can do in the conventional method is to check for an absolute levelness, relative levelness between frets by using a fret rocker. And that's very accurate, but all it tells you is, yes, you've got either perfect levelness or not perfect levelness. But the point here is, to get to that no rocking, you've taken away more material than you need to, because you've also taken away any unevenness below the level of the action you've aimed for, which you don't need to do. So that's kind of costing you fret metal to go for a sort of an absolute levelness, you could call it. This method, because it leaves the strings on, this method allows me to stop as soon as, for the chosen action, as soon as I can hear the note free up. And that means I can do it with less fret metal loss, which I think is a pretty good plus for this method. Okay, So what I'm doing is I'm bending the truss rod to mirror as close as possible the curvature on the neck, and as it sits with the strings on. And once I've done that, once I've got that mapped, I can then level this first track, as I call it, and I will do it fairly, well, very gently. And what I'm expecting to see, as with the Strat, I'm expecting to see the residual levelness of where somebody leveled the fret slightly before. So I wouldn't be surprised to just wipe this up and down here and then suddenly see a bunch of fairly flat spots showing up. And that's actually quite interesting because it's showing up pretty much everywhere except a low spot here and a high spot, if you could call it that, about there. I'm looking for low spots or high spots here, but at the moment I can't see anything. But actually we're really looking to see it over here between the G and the G and the D. That's where we know we've got a slight problem in actual playing, not in kind of abstract levelness. So we only take a very small amount of material. It's taking the pen off right back to the original leveling that somebody has done previously, which is fine. And we know that pretty much every note here plays. So it does still. What we do now is just recalibrate, even though we're doing the same calibration on the same spot. I'm going to recalibrate as we move this way and just double check that I haven't moved the curvature of this thing and it's still spot on. So now we're going to do the B track, and that now, again, that didn't really have any choking points. All the notes played previously at the action I've chosen here, so I'm not really expecting to see any major high points or weirdness show up at this point, but I will expect to see whatever kind of unevenness that we had on it from the factory or that was previously leveled out. We've got a low spot here, these two showing through at this point. Blow any dust away, keep it as clean as possible. Now this is the interesting one. I'm going to recalibrate now for the G, and it's between the G and the D that we're expecting to pick up whatever it is that causes the bent E to choke out as we bend across. Now, like I said, it may not be it may not be down to a high fret. It may just be more the fact that we've hit the limits of the geometry of a tight radius and mixed with a low action. I said earlier on that that has a constraint that we can't overcome. Something has to give, and that means you either change the radius, which you can't, or you raise the action, and that's sort of where you're at. Now this is pretty much spot on. Now I'd be interested to see what, if anything, shows up around the 14th fret. Now, do I have an absolute dependable statement? I can say that for every 9.5 inch radius at this and that playing action, this and that absolutely happens, and therefore you can't do anything, so don't even try. No, I don't have an answer to that. It seems to very slightly vary, and I don't quite know how or why. Now, as I'm going to bend a note here, I'm going to just clean up as much of the dust as I can. Playing through dies off in the middle of that, but that's over in the next track. So I'm going to do a tiny bit more on this G track, and then we're going to move to the D track, and I'm hoping that's the point at which we just eke out this note for this playing action chosen. Like I said, if we're hit by the limitations of the geometry of the radius, then so be it. Okay, I'm going to recalibrate for the D. So all told, taking very, very little material at all in this process. The fact that we're showing up with some kind of cut looking tops of frets is predominantly a result of previous leveling in the factory, which is always interesting to see how much was done there. Okay, we're lined up there again, same shape. Now we're going for the break my fingernails off. We're going for the A track, and it's this last bit of the A track that might have been snaffling off this bend, and maybe, you never know, this might just free that out. Let's see. It only has to be a tiny amount for it to change the playability. It's playing whereas it didn't before, so that's good. So it's not, we've now, between those two frets, we've now cleared it out. I'm just going to go back and do the G a tiny bit more and do the A again, and then we'll move on, and that will be what I consider to be its limits for this 9.5 inch radius. But that little bit of levelling has given us that note back without having to take more in the process than we, well, any more than we need to is the way of putting it. And that's the objective, and that's why I think this method is useful. Now, because you've got the strings on as a way of testing when you've reached the point you want to get to, then of course it's under load, and that then causes it to be curved, which means of course you do need to use this curved tool, and that's the only reason for having this curved tool, not for being flash or fancy in any way or form. It's because we can't do it, we can't have the strings on and not have them on at the same time. So the strings on is the secret, or the guide, and the strings on means the neck's loaded, which means it's curved, which means we need a tool that can level on a curve, and that's the only reason for it. Nothing more glamorous or clever dick than that, shall we say. Now this doesn't want to stay to one side, so that's a bit of a pain. I wonder if I can just lock it over here. I want it out of the way, please. I think this is going to hold it. Let's see if we can work around it. Yeah, so it isn't about any sort of clever theory of, well, hey, look, this is so clever and unique and different. It's purely expedient. In order to map or check how the leveling's working, I have to have the guitar neck strung, and if it's strung, it also happens to be therefore curved, and therefore I have to level it with it curved, which means I have to have a tool that can do that. Now there is an advantage, and that's like another gain from having it curved, and that is that it, with the strings on and loaded and the neck loaded, it's not only curved but it's also squashed in the longitudinal direction slightly, and that, believe it or not, has a slight impact on the shape of the seating of the frets, you might call it. So it's very small, the difference between that and doing it with the neck unloaded, but it is a little difference, and you could argue, if you wanted to be smart arse, you could argue that it's just fractionally more accurate because of that. Because if you level with the traditional method, with the neck off and relaxed, and perhaps obviously flattened out, and then use a fret rocker and a block, of course, yes, you're getting your frets perfectly leveled, but when you restring, you're reintroducing the longitudinal compression, which you didn't have in before, and that slightly, ever so slightly, throws out your nice levelness that you just achieved. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why I do it this way and continue to do it this way to this day, despite the occasional naysayer, doomsayer, or whatever the sayer is. Okay. Now, the other thing, by the way, you're hearing is fret slap, and that depends on how hard you hit your strings. You can always get it if you hit them really hard. Right, so I'm going to take these strings off, and then next part of the process, oh, we have to, oh, what was I going to do? Yeah. I was going to do, just check the intonation. Now this is obviously not a final check because we're going to change and we're going to put on, we're going to have lighter gauge strings in the end, but I'm just going to get a sense of the actual relative positioning of these saddles to see just how far we're going to have to move them to get them vaguely right, and that will give me an idea of how much I have to do in terms of finding some springs. So let's just getting this sort of sat out the way. Not far off. One of the funny things about intonation is people get very, or some people can get very, it's too short, we need to pull back. That's okay, that's not so bad. Yeah, people can get very irate about things like your tuner, what tuner you use, and whether it should be $1 billion expensive thing or whether you can do one with one of these. And actually, the biggest variable that goes on in your intonation checking is the way you press the strings, you know. So it's a kind of a real variable that can completely change from one person to another. So it's not an exact science, I'm afraid. That's a flappy sounding G to my liking. I think it does need a tree. Okay, that's not bad. You might, yeah, the B's still a bit loose, that spring. Okay, I'll take it back. I think Chris probably did set the intonation. Right, too short, we can tell that because it's in the wrong place. Well, taking these back will cure a fair bit of the slack spring problem that we were having, but one of them, the B, is still a bit slack. Now that's interesting. These two are showing at the moment being sharp, and the E is about to fall over the screw here, which means it doesn't really want to go any further back. It could be a problem. Let's leave it to about there, and we'll see if it's different on the new strings at the end. I'm conscious these are both cheap and now slightly used. I was saying it's way. That one's faulty reading, that, right? I've learned this the hard way. If you've got most of it in, everything else is in sequence, right, and you get one out like that, trust your machines, trust the pattern, and distrust the string you've got on. And we'll see now when we come to fit it with new, the 8s at the end, we'll find that problem will go away all of a sudden. I'm just going to clean off some grime off my fingertips for a second. Okay. Just for a minute. Missed. Okay, so I'm going to now slack off the strings. Remembering we've got a couple of little issues, like the B spring has a bit of slack in it, so it could end up zizzing, we don't know. I think the G needs the string tree, despite the staggered tuner. Be careful not to over tighten on the string fitting, because your strings will snap as it did on the original A. Now these are kind of dead anyway, so I'm going to snip them and chuck them, which is the luxury that Simon's very kind support affords me. There's quite a sharp angle that these are going over. That'll go all right. Eights, what's this thing going to be like with 8s on? Bendy. Right, so we've leveled the frets with a different gauge. All that will happen when we put the 8s on is it won't load the neck so much, and we'll have less relief probably. We'll just need to double check the resultant actions, and we know that we can adjust them if we need to. Now what we've got here is we're going to need to re-radius the frets now. So I'm going to get the StewMac fret file or crowning file, and I'm going to go back down here and mark up these. Now at this point you could, maybe I'll do it, I think what I'll do is I'll tape off the fingerboard. Now, after having had a horrible shock with the Powerhouse strap and its brittle, cracked off, flimsy finish, this one looks much more substantial, but I'm also extremely nervous. So what I'll do is I'll get my light low tack paper, which is all I use, but you have a sort of limit to how much you know about your paper, because while it claims to be low tack, you never quite know what it's doing. You just have to hope. But there is a way you can sort of help yourself a bit, and it's to do this. So we'll rub it across the fibrous surface to begin with. And we'll pick up a few fibres, and it's, as long as it's not got any bits of metal in it, obviously, but we can sort of stick it down with a bit less grip. So that's one way of taming the grip, if you're not confident or that you think the finish might be suspect. But to be fair, there isn't a lot of ways you're going to get to do this polish out without protecting the fingerboard. You could use a fret protector strip, but having said that, you're going to be pushing and rubbing a piece of metal up against, if you're working with, you know, let's say the finish is really suspect and trying to fall off, then you'll be physically pushing a piece of metal with some tape around it up against this suspect finish. So it's not necessarily going to save its life any more than doing this. I mean, technically it would be better if possibly part of this tape was not sticky at all, the bit that went over there, but I can't really see how realistically it's going to work if you don't have some stick to it, you know what I mean? But I am doing my best to tame the stickiness, having learned a hard way. So I'm going to place this on here for a minute and go into the world of cutting up lots of bits of sticky tape, which is really exciting. So I'm going to switch off and listen to the radio, and I'm going to come back to you. Oh, sorry, before I do the sending out, I'll do this, but I'll do it off camera because I'm bored now, and it's Sunday, I'm entitled to have a day off. So I'll come back to you when I'm done and ready to restring, and then we can hear it and see what it sounds like with the 8s on it. See you in a bit. Okay, we're back. Time to string up the guitar. Probably going to leave playing it to another day. Daytime tomorrow would be good. Yeah, we'll do that, but we'll just get the strings in now, in. We'll check the intonation, or double check it with these 8s. I've just strung up my semi-acoustic one that I've just done, and the bridge isn't quite far enough back. Problem is, it doesn't have a lot of travel. It's a single wraparound bridge. So what I'm probably going to do is replace it with a sort of Tone Pros copy. You can get quite inexpensively. The problem is, the one I want is gold, and they keep not having it in stock. But in principle, I'm going to try it out with the chrome one I've got on another travel guitar in the house. So I'll just pinch that from it and see if it solves my issues, which would be good, because it was, up to that point, it was a nice little semi-acoustic. Look at this, getting stuck, hitting the screw. Wow. Holy moly. I did manage to get some, yeah, I've got them through before. 8s. Skinny. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Oh God, thank you. Anyway, so yeah, not an ideal place. I had no choice where I put the shed. But anyway, so here's my ultralight strings going on here, and I will do my best to try to remember not to do them up too tight. Yeah, so I haven't contacted Chris yet about the second string tree, but I'll do that. Now what I won't do on this is I'm just going to lock it and try not to lock it too hard, but I worry about it coming back out. We'll find out. It'll only cost a set of strings if it does. Should spin these round till they line up. Ready? Okay. tend to prefer, when I'm doing my guitars, I prefer to pull back a fingernail's worth, because I want enough to wind on in case I have to remove the strings and redo them. Because that way you can push the crimped bit forward for the second time. You just get 2 bites at it, whereas if you do it like I've just done now, it'll go all the way through one go. That's it. You will not have another loosen off and restring option. But hey, I shouldn't need it. Everything is good. You can see that none of the lacquer came off this guitar. What I did notice while I was doing the clean, or trying to clean all the black pen marks, is a little bit, occasionally there's a couple of little bits caught down there, and that's because, contrary to what I thought, this looks like it was sprayed over and then the lacquer polished off the frets, like I'm going to do on the Strat. I have no choice but to do on the Strat, and that leaves a slightly crunchy pile of stuff at the bottom of the frets that you can't really do anything about without. You can't really get in there and tidy it up. So that's unfortunately caught a little bit of the marker pen here and there. But this is one of those things you kind of discover as you see how or you work out how the thing was fretted. If you're bothered by that sort of stuff, but I am, because why, it's my breads and butters. Here are some 8s, ladies and gentlemen. Now I will double check with Chris before I put on a second string tree, because obviously it makes a hole in the headstock and I don't want to do that unless he's... I think I'm running out of batteries there. Yeah, it's permanent modification, so we want to be absolutely sure that's what he wants. Okay, so first tune-up. And so at this point I'm just going to concentrate on stretching out the strings, because this is critical to the tuning stability of your guitar. We've probably gone on about this plenty of times in Chris's other 2 guitars, 3 now. But yeah, it's vital. If you don't get this bit done, your guitar won't stay or play in tune, or it won't stay in tune long enough. I'm looking now and I can see look, see, I've done exactly the same on 2 of them. I'm going to photograph that again just to make the point. You know, I didn't think about it, and as you can see, I just went straight ahead and did it, but it's done exactly the same twice, so it really is something to watch out for, because I'll need to slack off and take care of it. So I needed 2 out of 3. So, but you have to go quite a long way off to get it lifted up and over. Up and out, basically. Come back here. Thank you. Right, I'll carry on with stretchings. I've got to be very careful with these because the 8s are very, very fragile. And the top E's and B's, and they break pretty easily. But you still need to get the stretch out. Now, the problem with this, if I bust one of these high 8Es, it'll cost me a whole pack, which I happen to have a spare pack just in case. So light. Good. Wow. Okay, that is going to be it for today. I'm going to come back and just play it through tomorrow to have a listen to those groovy pickups, but oh, and maybe put on the second string tree. But there we go. So far, so good. All in order. Okay, see you soon. We are with Chris's Telecaster. With an interesting wiring system. It's got the brown sugary blend, so it says, which means on the neck, sorry, on the first position, you've got the neck humbucker with the tone engaged on full. Doesn't make any difference. This is known as, what do they call it? The woman tone. This is open G as well. So that's the first position. Next position, center position is neck position. Oh, hang on a minute. No, that. Okay, right. This is the first position is that with tone full on. Center is that without tone. This position is the neck pickup, no, blah, 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 first position, bridge position, okay, they call this one number 1 down here. Number 1, here, bridge pickup is engaged. Volume knob acts as expected, but the tone knob blends the neck pickup in. So, as at 10, you have the full bridge pickup. As you roll down towards the neck, sort of towards 0, brings in the neck. It doesn't say whether it dials out the bridge altogether. Apparently that's the mix of the two. That's what they're all about, that's what they say anyway. So this is it. So what would we have it on? So for that kind of thing you'd have middle, wouldn't you? Probably. Middle. Neck without tone. interesting. It sounds good enough to me. It's also well, looking to feedback. It's got a nice ring to it. Accidentally turns it up. Hit those 8s without bending them, sorry. Very bendy. That's the difference when you're playing with an 8 and you're normally used to heavier. You can put them straight out of tune just by grabbing them. That one. It was a like it. They are beautiful pickups. I can't get on with the 8s personally, but they are nice clangy pickups, great quality, love it. I just added a string tree here as well to give that G a bit more sustain than it had. It was a little bit on the spongy side because of the break angle, I think, so I've adjusted the top 4 so they're all at about the same angle. Anyway, there we have it. Chris's Telecaster ready for a quick dust over back in the box, and then we're on to the important completion of the Powerhouse Strat, which we've got the neck in the house. It's been refinished on the front with some satin nitro, so it's kind of sitting for a couple more days before I put it together, and then we'll polish out the frets and it'll be ready to go. This is a very low action. I think for Keith type stuff, open G stuff, you might want it a little bit higher than this, but I've started down as low as fret leveling is. Allowed it. It plays okay, but like I say, for me the 8's just a little bit too easy to push out of tune for my liking. But there we go. Thanks for watching this. See you again soon.